Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We do everything online these days. You always wonder, is your data safe? We take it for granted. And then you hear these stories of data breaches and sensitive information getting into the hands of attackers and those looking for ransom on your information. We're going to dig deeper into this today, get a kind of lay of the land in terms of what's being done, what is done, and we got a professional. He's our professional of the year, and he's got a company that propels organizations forward, really revolutionizing their IT systems, making them more efficient, and most importantly, ensuring compliance. His company is Business Automation Experts, and he's Matt Lepkowski, and he joins us today. Hey, Matt, how you doing?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so glad you're here. So many questions, so much going on in terms of data. Let's start with what your company does broadly. Can you explain?
Sure. So I'll back it up a little bit because we're about 20 years old. And I remember challenges around data when I was in automotive. So we always had things that we were trying to do to improve our processes. You know, if you're applying technology, it's to benefit the organization. And so there was always a tug and pull on what we can do, when we can do it. And I worked for a company in New Jersey. They moved me out here to run their IT. And from there, I kind of spawned a passion to work with smaller organizations, certainly ones in the area. I prefer to help my neighbors. And then to begin with, it was mostly how do we improve procedures and things, because many times companies want to grow, right? If you're small, you don't want to stay small. And usually there's some sort of impediment to that growth, and technology can be a great way to unlock that. So my background is really software engineering and things. I've written quite a few different things for hospitals and then other organizations. We kind of got dragged into the cyber side of these things around 2015, a little bit earlier actually, because the healthcare space became the target. And there's a few reasons for that, why it certainly has maintained that status. But to begin with, it was about the price of a health record. And back, before that, everybody was after your bank records, which was not really a surprise, right? And the banks got wise and put various things in place. And then threat actors sort of said, oh, well, it's hard to attack a bank, but look at these hospitals, they're super easy. And the value of a health record was about 50, 60 times. So it was easier to steal and you got paid more to take the data.
Can I jump in here? Why is the health record more valuable?
Well, you have way more in it. In a bank record, I maybe know your social security number, I know your date of birth, I know your name, maybe I know your address. A health record, I'm going to know all of that, plus your mother's maiden name, what diseases you have, how many times you went to the hospital, what were your current diagnoses, what are your allergies, a whole range of things. So the more I know, as you kind of alluded to on the data side of it, the more I can do to you, right? Because I can kind of attack you if I wanted to exploit some things. So the reason that we have HIPAA, I remember when Bill Clinton signed that into law, right? And the reason that we have data protection in healthcare was actually a nurse in Florida. And what he was doing was taking records and he would sell those records. And I think like Arthur Ashe became one of the ones that got caught up in this. And so he testified to Congress. He said, we can't allow people to just take this health information because his HIV status came out. And that's why our health records, HIV and mental health, are really, really protected. Like if there's ever a problem with that, getting out in the open, there's really big fines for that. And then there's just, well, they lost control. They call that a breach. And what attracted the threat actors in was the price of a record. It was the ease and the price. And what's kept them has been because of that law, we have to have insurance. And the insurance companies say this is a covered event. And so when they started doing the ransomware and other things, the insurance companies pay the bill. And so then it's like, great, they raise the ransom. So it's just nonstop. And unfortunately, in healthcare, we have a lot of older systems. Those aren't the easiest thing to replace, and they aren't the easiest thing to defend, because there's things that were built where they didn't really think about, oh, maybe I should encrypt this data or add some additional protections to this. And so we've had to grow that side of our business quite a bit because the clients needed a lot there. And so we've been kind of pushing. I don't necessarily like dealing with that situation, but I see opportunities for people to improve. So I'll say a challenge in healthcare is we have a lot of disparate systems, and then we have a lot of different people that are doing different things in there. So that's very hard to defend. And we can now leverage more tools today that will give us the ability to monitor what's going on in there and then say, that doesn't look right. Why is Dr. So-and-so, going over here when he doesn't normally go there? And so then you can have a human look at it, or you can have the computer say, nah, disable Dr. So-and-so's account so that he can't go anywhere. And so those things are now very available and much more affordable. And unfortunately, hospitals will look at the bank systems, because they're like, oh, the banks put this stuff in. And a lot of that technology is 20 years old, and pretty much all of the threat actors know how to get around it. So you're basically using sticks and stones against people that have rockets and stuff. And they need to kind of, again, update and upgrade and take advantage of things that are out there. So we've spent a lot of time kind of helping them navigate those choppy waters.
In your opinion, and I know there's a lot involved in the healthcare records, it goes right down to the patient portals. Then we have within the practices, there's all different types of software that hold those records. One of the companies I know is Nextech. There's a whole bunch of them. In your opinion, Matt, overall, I'm talking broadly here, do you think that medical records in the United States are fairly safe, or we have a problem?
Well, all right. I would say most doctors' offices, so you probably remember we had the recession in 2008, right? And so they passed the thing for the High-Tech Act, and that really kicked in around 2010, 2012-ish. So we went from about, say, 30% of organizations, well, I'll flip it, 70% to 75% of everybody was paper, right? And the government said, it's not so great. So they flipped it, and now it's much higher, and then 90% covered by health records, right? No more paper. That also created the other problem. That's why 2015 was also kind of seminal, because if they tried to attack you 2009, they'd have to back up a truck, take boxes, start photocopying. Much harder to do it, right? Now it's all digital. Download it. Can download 5,000 records, no problem. A lot of doctors have outsourced those things. So I would say, like, if you're going to your doctor's office, it's not really a problem, because it's not his system. It's somebody else's system, right? And they have the resources to try and defend these things. They do get attacked, but they're pretty much up on the game. So you've mentioned like Next Gen, they're pretty good. Athena Health, a range of those. And then in hospitals, we have Cerner is a big one that usually runs on-prem, so that one's kind of scary. And then Epic, we do a lot of stuff with Epic, and that one's we'd have to go into the architecture. I can't explain that simply for people, but it can be on-prem. A lot of it's kind of hosted, so it's pretty safe in that perspective. But there are so one of the things that came out with the High-Tech Act is we have to meaningfully use these systems, right? Quote unquote. And that meant we had to upload stuff to health information exchanges, and we had to connect from doctor to doctor. And that's why you have like 5,000 portals. If you ever go to a doctor, you're like, well, you want to get this, you got to get this log on. You want to go here, you got to get this log on. And so they have a system, or it was part of the law, or meaningful use. I wouldn't say it's the law, but you had to upload the stuff. And they never really had a great business model for health information exchanges. And so there's this huge honeypot of everybody's data, and they don't necessarily have great defenses there. So even if they don't break your hospital, they have a copy of the hospital somewhere else. And so then that becomes a little more interesting to work with.
It also becomes confusing for the patient as we center
Yeah.
on healthcare.
Yes.
I went to the doctor recently, had a minor cold, and the practice is City MD,
Mhm.
but then I get a text from Summit Health.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's Summit Health? And you figure it out that, it's a portal, it's a login. But
Yeah.
everything is so apparently disconnected and like, great word, honeypot, where everything is all hanging out. Um, when you
Yeah.
think about it, when you just fathom what's going on here, it's pretty scary. And I never realized until you said it how deep the information goes. Mother's maiden name and all that. You brought back a memory. I had a primary care doctor in 2000,
Mhm.
and he was part of a small practice. Great guy, kind of old school. And that's when they were starting to switch over to electronic records. And
Right.
he was bucking the system. He's like,
Uh-huh.
I just want to write things down. That's how I work.
Yeah.
And he actually left the practice. And
Mhm.
he might have left the medical industry because he didn't want to adhere to it. That was just his belief.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely happened. A lot of what they did in hospitals is they use scribes. So pretty much any doctor that is, I'll say 65 and up, because I mean, look, in medicine, in tech, we always have to get educated and constantly invest, and then they usually try to kick us out at some point. In healthcare, we keep them around quite a while. And you want to work with those guys that have been around a long time because they've seen, like every disease there is, and they
Sure.
know how to deal with a lot of situations. And, if you go to a younger doctor, they're going to do 500 tests, and then they'll eventually get to the answer. Whereas you can go to some of the other guys, and they can look at you and say like, well, here, you need this,
Yep.
and the hospitals need to have those resources because a lot of them are teaching hospitals, right? And they usually would use medical students or others, and they'll come in and then they follow that doctor around because they usually have to round with them anyways. And so, hey, type this for me,
Hmm.
or he'll, have stuff and repeat it back to me. Okay, do that. And a big challenge in healthcare right now, they call it burnout. And if I spent 15 minutes with you as a patient, right? It would take me maybe 30 minutes to finish the documentation on the computer, click this, type that. And that's brutal for these guys.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
if we wanted to just increase our capacity as a health system, if we can drop, 20% off of their workload, that gives them hours left in their day. They could do more for us. And there's a lot
Yeah.
going on in that space. That's why we have automation in our name. I've done a lot of things for doctors before the whole um, distraction with cyber. We would do a lot of things with the medical record systems to save steps in there. We still do that, but it's not as often because you know, they click on a screen, 50 options, and there's things you can do to say, well, doc, what's your most frequently asked, most frequently prescribed drugs? And then you just give him the 10, 20 that there are. He clicks it, he can rename things. There isn't a lot of consistency in medical terminology, even though, like we haven't made new humans, but every doctor kind of describes things in a different way. And so there's a lot of variance in medical language when you get out there.
Tell me about the automation and what you offer in the medical arena, how you make things more streamlined for a medical practice.
Sure. So, like I said, my background's in software, and originally it was kind of building building these systems for practices or others to let's say deal with prescription processes and things. And in the last 10 years, a lot of that got combined, right? Because it used to be you bought one system, you put something in there, and then you had to hook it to another system to run prescriptions. And then, so again, you see a lot of this in healthcare. Like there's 15 different things that are going on just to get something done. And we then switched more towards what you would call robotic process automation. So those are, there's two ways to basically connect systems together. One way would be back end, and in healthcare, we use a standard called HL7, Health Language 7 something. And that's just a standard to say this system will send a message to this other system and they can kind of talk to each other. So a lot of that exists in hospitals and other organizations. That's great. The front end usually will have things that are way beyond what HL7 can pass around. So a lot of that extra work, there will be a lot of compliance questions and other things that occur for the doctors. So like, did you ask them about this? Did you do this? Did you check that thing? Why did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really factor into a message that goes from one system to another. It's kind of, you're in one system and they want all these extra questions answered. And what you can do now is kind of give those doctors some tools. So they like to use audio systems, right? Like Dragon is a common system that they use. And they can put in certain kind of short phrases. So they'll just say, broken arm, severe. And then it'll just load that stuff in there for them so they don't have to say the same thing 20 times a day. And there's tricks and tips that we usually work with them on so that they can get through their day a lot faster because, most doctors actually like humans. They really like to treat patients. They like to make a difference. They don't like to do paperwork. And I don't think
When that's going on, Matt, is that when they're with the patient? Because I've gone to some specialists where they use a dictation machine,
yeah.
click, blah, 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 click, and then somebody transcribes it. What
Mhm.
you're describing, would it be when they're with the patient? So they're doing a one-on-one and then, press a button and say patient broken arm severe. Would that be done during the exam?
It's going that way. So they are using stuff called ambient transcription. So they'll put the way you can kind of describe it is like an Alexa kind of thing that'll be in the room with you and the patient. And so then we can do things with that where the doctor comes in, and they announce who they are. I'm treating patient blah, blah, blah. And it kind of, okay, now we know what record we're starting to work with. And then he can kind of say, well, how are you feeling today? Tell me about your allergy. What about this? How is this drug working? How is it not working? And they can capture those things and then document immediately for that. And in that process, they can say, I want, treatment plan 12 or something like that. And it will then load that set of pre-built options. So the doctor could then, after the patient's there, click and fix anything that they have to do. But usually they do it after the patient. So if they came in, they talked to you, they usually still paper. They will jot stuff down because they have shorthand for all the things that they do. They will have like I work with a lot of doctors. They do like these one-page template things. And so they just have the common things and they circle things. Then they go back and they take that and basically transfer it into the system. And they will say, they'll click on the spot and they'll say broken arm, severe paragraph, and then they'll click on something else and then they keep going. And that is why I was saying it's not even like 50-50. It is more lopsided to the paperwork side.
Wow. Amazing to hear that in 2024.
Yeah, people are working on it.
Yeah, and
And
everybody has their own style. Doctors used to writing it down on paper. I would think even in this age of technology, you have tablets like the Remarkable that
yes.
maybe it could be written on a tablet and then inputted, through intelligence, where you don't have to. It seems like there's two steps there.
Yeah. So one of the projects we worked on earlier on that was like I said, I worked with a doctor. He had a form that was front and back. And so it was not really a great use of his time either because he kept, copying this thing and then he would send it to a company and then they would bind it so they could come and tear off a paper. And then if he had another situation and he had to go over to the other one and tear off that other paper. And then that was how he would capture things. And then that would get scanned. Then it would go to India. They would type, then it would come back. And then he'd say, nope, that's wrong. Then they had to fix it. And he was doing things for pain management. And if you've been in pain, you don't want to be in pain, right? The systems are set up such that when we started with that doctor, it would take about a week, right? So if you saw him on a Monday, he would get a report probably on a Friday. So that's why they would schedule you for the following Monday. And that whole time period, you're in pain. We took that process down to 30 seconds. So he went
Wow.
with we just used some standard forms. We just had things on a computer. He just touched the stuff. And then if it needed the expanded thing, he would click it and then that extra thing would show up. Then he would click that stuff and we would translate that, if you will. We take that input and then we knew the paragraphs that were connected to that. So we worked in his parlance to say, it would have the word that he would know and he would hit that and he knew what that meant. And that would be very consistent. So he didn't really have to tweak it much until there was a situation where he would have a patient that would be a very severe situation. Maybe they were in an automotive accident, and they lost a limb and X, like rare. But in that situation, he would have to do more work. But you could knock out 95, 98% of his visits. And that meant you saw him on a Monday, you'd see him again on a Wednesday. So you could get through a treatment cycle a lot faster. So we built his practice was able to expand by tenfold.
Wow.
Right? One doctor could do 10x. And that was how they used to do the sales of medical records and things. They would come in, oh, we're going to help you, it'll make things better. And what they used to do was you could code from in Medicare, you have levels, right? So if you're there for a visit, level 1 is like 5 minutes, level 2 is like 10 minutes, and then 3, 4, 5, right? And no doctor would ever bill a 5 because 1, you had to have all kinds of documentation for it. And 2, it usually triggered some kind of an audit, right? Somebody knocked on your door, doctor, there's no way you're this thorough, right? Prove to me that we should pay you, $300 for that visit because we don't think that you did that. And the medical record systems, what they started with was, doc, if you're going to see a patient repeatedly, we can just copy everything from the previous visit to the next visit. Then you just make the tweaks because, most humans don't miraculously cure in a day. And the changes are pretty minimal. So then they could basically bill level 4 visits constantly because they would always be afraid to upcode that. And so the unintended side effect when the government put all these medical record systems into the hospitals and all of a sudden the level codes went way up and Medicare freaked out because they said, this is insane. They can meet the standard and our bills are way up. So you went from like everything level 2, level 3 to everything like 3, 4 or 4, 5. And we're paying
Wow.
for that benefit. So I don't know. Is that great that we have really detailed records now? It's great for those threat actors because they have more to download. But it's interesting to see all those confluence of events and things, and then you introduce the X factors of humans coming in and saying, well, we can steal this, we can encrypt it, and so you just can't control it. We can do a range of things. And
So
so
there's so much going on here. I didn't even consider insurance. So now, you have the office visit, then they have to talk to the insurance company. Your medical records are going there. Then it's available for the patient on a portal. Um, how, and I know it's a complicated question, how do
Mhm.
we ensure that that data is truly safe? Because it's accessible in so many different areas.
Yeah, so it's kind of security through obscurity right now because it is sliced up. There's a lot of things in a lot of places.
Sure.
So if you took the insurance side of it, they're basically banks. They don't take a full record. What they do is they basically require a doctor to upload like a PDF or something. Like they don't move that record. They kind of take a report from it, and they're just doing that to
Okay.
slow down the doctor, right? Because they're going to say, well, we're not. You probably have seen or heard of the prior authorizations and things. That's kind of the new fun game insurance companies have. So they basically say like everything requires a medical review on their side. And the default setting is no. So you have to do all this extra work, and your doctor typically has to call the insurance company doctor to say, "Oh yeah, let's go forward with this MRI or do this or do that." And it's just designed to create speed bumps in the system. And you constantly see that back and forth. So even if we were able to make the doctors even more efficient, the insurance side will create another set of speed bumps or other things to try and, again, make it more difficult to get something done.
So to better understand that, I want to make sure I have it clear. It, it it makes me feel a little bit better if I'm understanding this right. So the insurance companies only get a slice of the information. They
Yes.
basically get what they need to process it, but they don't have your hands in their hands into everything.
No.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah, they will have so the payment system works on, there's two parts. So there's a diagnosis. We went through a huge thing we used to have ICD-9 codes, right? So there are like 4,000 codes. And that's what a doctor would figure out. That's why we have doctors. They say, here's what's wrong with you. And then with that code, you have what's called a CPT code, and that's what you do, right? So that's what you get paid for. And we went from ICD-9 to 10, so we went to 60,000 codes. So now it's like a mess, right? Because you can now, if you broke a bone, they want to know which bone, what hand, and then was it the first time they saw you? Is it a result of something else? It takes a lot longer to code that. And the insurance companies require that, plus what did we do? And usually the CPT codes are behind this rule engine that says, unless this is what's wrong, we're not paying for this. And that makes some sense, right? Like, came in with a headache, why is he going to take your gallbladder out? So they use that to their advantage. And usually their rules are based on those CPT codes, what you do codes, and they have extra rules that uh, creates. So the doctor, all he really says is, here's the diagnosis. This is what I did. That's all he ever has to say. It's the insurance number ID, right? Like, what's your number?
Sure.
It's that data service. He was here. This is what's wrong with him. And this is what I did. And then that is supposed to create, that's an invoice, and then money flows from that. So not everything goes there.
Gotcha. I don't know how you do what you do. It is so detailed as an IT professional. I bet, you probably joke along the side that you could probably be a doctor yourself, knowing all these different things and codes. Um, we have a minute or two left. I want to pivot over to information in general because it's still trending. The Ticketmaster breach.
Yeah.
Um, your overall thoughts on how that data got out there and how it actually did. I understand it was on a cloud and
Yeah.
somebody had access to the cloud.
Yeah, so there's vendors, right? Ticketmaster, they are a monopoly, but they're more a payment monopoly, right? They still have all those other vendors that were in the woodpile. And you have a ton of different systems. And what you're seeing is legislative changes and things coming out that are saying you can't just say, the third party, that's their issue. We dealt with it in healthcare. So another one of those changes with high tech, it used to be the original law. If your vendor screwed up, the hospital was still the problem. Like, so that's why the insurance was always at the hospital level. And they now have things called business associate agreements where they can transfer the problem. So if you're a vendor, you have to sign this thing. So then if you have a problem, you get sued. You have to have insurance. Like I have to have a BAA for my company to do work in healthcare. Therefore, I have to carry a lot of insurance to be in the industry. Ticketmaster, they don't have those kinds of rules, and
Wow.
the stuff doesn't, it's, we have more maturity in different spaces. And you kind of see some of the stuff through what they call the PCI DSS, which is, remember, Target. Target, they had this big problem where somebody came in and then they captured every swipe through there and they just had to do it on a store level. So they captured the whole stream. They didn't have to do it on each reader. And Target was like, that's the bank's problem. The bank's like, no, you got to fix this. And then they created this thing. So if you want to have a credit card, you have to meet these rules. And it's not a government, it's banks. The banks made this up. And Ticketmaster has various obligations from PCI DSS around how to control this. And obviously they didn't do it. And so
Wow.
their fees are going to go up from the banks because they're going to say, you guys weren't doing what you're supposed to do. And there will be a knock-on effect. And on top of it, Ticketmaster's already under review for being a monopoly and manipulating the prices, this whole stuff because they own StubHub. So they think that they're purposely moving seats to StubHub to get resale value on things. But who knows? I'm sure attorneys will figure it out.
Yeah. In my opinion, as a consumer, and I got the letter, ticket
Yeah.
master breach.
Yeah.
Big fail in that
What?
in the letter, it said you can check your cybersecurity. You can check, your all your data here. Click this link, and it was a link to a service that's uh, overlooked by TransUnion. So I
Yeah.
clicked the link and put it in, and every time I did it, I got a 404, meaning,
Yeah.
it was a dead link. And then there's customer service number. The people, when I call customer service, didn't even know what it was about. And the number was provided. If you have an issue, call this number. Like a complete, it's almost as if like Ticketmaster was
Yeah.
tripping over its feet,
Well,
handled it poorly.
we don't have time, but we could talk about this process. That's because of the insurance companies. So, there's a breach, there's a PCI problem, they have insurance to cover these things. And so what happens is the insurance companies come in, they say, I'm making a claim. And the insurance companies have processes where that's why you got the letter, right? So usually they bring in an attorney, they do some kind of an investigation, who got hit, what happened. Then you get the mail, and you're like, we're going to pay for this type of thing. Here's your access code, whatever. That's all outsourced. That's not from Ticketmaster.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you'd think like these guys do this all the time. And the paperwork's wrong. Because that was a mail merge document, right? So they had some data and then they just said, insert these things in here, send mail. And stuff happens.
Unbelievable. I was so frustrated. I'm not even going to joke.
Yeah.
I clicked that link 15 times over a span of like 10 days. I'm like, you can't be sending a letter out.
Yeah.
You did something wrong. This can't be. It's got to, and it never worked. I took the letter, threw it away. It's like, and if there's any kind of settlement, what are you going to get? $3.80 or whatever it comes down to with the class
You're
action.
gonna get a free ticket. Yeah.
Yeah, that's never going to happen. Matt, great talking with you today. Love the insight. If somebody has a business looking to lock down their data, or
Sure.
even a medical practice, or even just wants to have a conversation with you, what's the best way to find you?
Well, I'm online, obviously. A good number. I can give you my number, right?
Sure.
732-356-2789. And happy to review things. Like I said, I'm very interested in helping mid-size companies that are trying to grow, deal with, there's a lot of pressure. I have a small company myself. I know what's going on.
Sure. What's your website, by the way?
Businessautomationexperts.com. It's rolls off the tongue. So there's actually a shorter version, which is the BAE-LLC.com, but you can get us there.
Happy that you are the expert, our professional of the year. I'm going to be honest, we're way over time today on this show. I could go on forever. There's so many different pieces here in data that affects our daily lives. Looking forward next time we get together. Thanks for being here today.
Appreciate your time.
Appreciate it. Thanks. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.